I mean, for me, it's about risk, isn't it? And I suppose we are very much. I think let me start off by saying I think a council is incredibly good at some things and not so good at other things. I think we've got to recognise where the private sector does better than what we can do in terms of delivering at cost and what have you. We have built some stuff ourselves. We cannot compete with the private sector in terms of costs, in terms of when you think about our pension liabilities, employment rights, and all of that, etc. A council has so much higher costs when we're starting. So if we've got to pay for the land as well, I haven't seen a business case that really stacks up where I think, yeah, this is going to be an absolute go, and it's going to be fine. So I think we've got to lean on the private sector in terms of all of that. They've got the best skills and expertise around that type of thing, and I think that. As local government, unless we partner with the private sector, particularly on house building on our own land and what have you, um, it's too much risk for councils to face. For a small district council, when our budget's just over £10 million, that's an incredibly massive ask for us to say we're going to borrow all of this money, we're going to build all of these houses, and we're going to deliver this without that expertise from the private sector. I mean, we've got a joint agreement with. Hertfordshire County Council, where we own lots of land that's in our local plan, and we will probably go out to the market to find a partner to work with us. It's 1,000 over 1,000 houses. That is too much for us to build as a district council in terms of all of that risk and what have you. So we've got to work together. And I suppose what I look for in a partner is honesty. Just tell me how it is. If it's not going to work, tell me. I'll tell you if I don't think it's going to work from our side, and let's have that. I like to pick up the phone. If there's an issue, phone me. Let's sort it out. Let's get to the end goal. Let's do it. I'm not a keyboard warrior in terms of all of that, because I think that can just get a bit messy. Let's just crack on and do business, and let's get on with it. So we've got to. I don't see how any council is not going to do it. We are in detailed discussions with our largest social housing provider, B3 Living, in terms of what land we've got and how we can partner with them, because they're in a similar situation in terms of what does that risk look like for them. They're a similar size organisation to ourselves, and are we better going together in terms of what we can do and what we can deliver to share that risk? Because I think the housing market is very volatile. The government have obviously are increasingly tightening the screws on borrowing money for all of these different initiatives that councils want to do, and we've got to kind of square that circle. And I suppose what annoys me in that situation is we can borrow money very cheaply, and councils have gone out to buy things on the open market, and we've probably pushed up the prices, because if we're bidding and then against another local authority that can also borrow money cheaply, we're for the value for the taxpayer is getting increasingly difficult. So there's all of those types of issues, and I think they kind of get solved if we do partner with private sector.
Fantastic. Well, look, I'm sure there are all sorts of colleagues out there who would happily advise on how to mitigate some of those risks, because whatever it is, 80% of local authorities now are delivering directly one way or another. So I'd invite them to contact you, Lewis, and let you know how that might be done. But talking about the plans you've got specifically, and in terms of partnerships, you mentioned earlier the difficult journey you have to take residents on in order to
Yeah.
achieve your growth plans. What about political partners? What about your fellow members of Broxbourne Council, both in your administration and in the opposition? How difficult is it to build consensus around growth politically?
It's incredibly difficult, because obviously people get involved in local politics because they want to change their area, they want to support their community, and everyone's got an opinion, which is incredibly good, because we're all there and we're all from different walks of life to represent our communities as a whole. And it's incredibly difficult, and I suppose what the biggest challenge to that is when we've partnered with something, or when something hasn't gone particularly well, all they know, or all they kind of say to me is, this is what's happened and we can't allow that to happen again. There isn't this, oh, that was brilliant, let's do that. That's at the back of the mind in terms of that. So my job is kind of, let's say, let's look at all of the good stuff. What have we done really well? But it only takes one thing to go wrong, and then that makes everyone incredibly nervous around, what are we going to do next time, and what is that going to look like, and what safeguards can we put in place? Because I mean, I don't tend to let developers, on the whole, I do sometimes, depending on the circumstances or what have you, come and present to members, simply because I think members get fed up with, you're only going to tell us what's good about the development. I'm only hearing one side of the story. So I know what you're going to tell me before you've even spoken, that it's amazing and we've got to do it, essentially. That's what you're going to say to me. And if I was you, I'd say the same thing. I get all of that. But I like everyone to have all parts of that jigsaw puzzle in terms of to be able to make that decision. And I think if you're honest with them all and say, well, this is the negative, and there will always be some kind of negative, but here's the positives, generally you can convince people around in terms of that argument around, we want some growth, we want some investment, here is what the infrastructure that's going to come with that, and you've got to enable people to make their own decisions around that. I suppose if we get led up the garden path. I'll give you an example. So when developers come and ask for outline planning permission, it looks amazing. It looks absolutely amazing. And then when it comes to full plan application, it looks nothing like what you've shown me in outline plan application. So I'm like, well, and the more developers that do that, even, and I say good guys and bad guys, even if a good guy comes along and we've in our head, you're a bad guy because we've seen this happen before and we don't like how it's changed. So just be as open, as honest as you can be, because once you lose that trust, it's incredibly difficult, and it only takes one developer to lose that trust in the council. It's incredibly difficult to get it back, and then it makes my job even harder to convince everybody that we need this and we want to do this and we want to deliver.
And of course, you share that information amongst other fellow local authorities, right? You're talking to
Oh,
other leaders and
absolutely, and I suppose political parties go out the window at this specific point, because I think all leaders want to deliver the best for their place. And I suppose if a leader rang me from a different authority and said, partnered with this company, and it was incredibly badly, that is gold dust to me, because that you're in a similar position to me. You care about your area and you've been through something that's not necessarily worked out. That is complete gold dust. And then it makes me incredibly nervous then, because I'm like, well, even if you've presented me the world, I'm like, well, in the back of my mind, someone's told me that it hasn't worked out. And if I can do that on every development, I will. And we continually discuss across leaders, particularly in Hertfordshire. We all meet regularly, and we would all say if something had, but on the other side of that, we all say when something's gone particularly well. So there are two sides to that coin, but obviously it's the bad stuff that sticks in my mind more than the good stuff.
and speaking about relationships with fellow local authorities and the sort of last part of this partnerships question, the Hertfordshire Growth Board, which
Yeah.
you're a member, how is that progressing in terms of the work, the strategic combined strategic planning of all the local authorities in Hertfordshire, moving towards a sort of a common growth plan?
It's going really well, and I think where planning is now heading towards is, I think we've done in this country, done to death, add-on developments to towns and cities and what have you, and I think we kind of need to look across boundaries in terms of, let's create a new settlement, because I believe that's easier to sell, because when you create a new settlement, if there are no roads there, well, you've got to build a road to get to the new settlement. It's not adding on to a town where you can just add a road on and then you use the existing highway. So because we're moving down that route in terms of the new towns, I think particularly in Hertfordshire, we've got to look across borders. Where are these likely to go? Where is there space for one? Where is there good transport links that we can connect into in terms of train stations? Is more I'm thinking about. Road infrastructure we need to build, but if there's already a fantastic train station that's there, let's see if we can link into. Let's see if we can link into that. And I suppose we've been on that journey across Hertfordshire. It is incredibly difficult. Some of my colleagues have an incredibly hard job in terms of their local plan. They're all envious of Broxbourne, that we've got a local plan. Most of it's got outline planning permission. They've got incredibly hard jobs, and we've got to work together across that, because I think once we're through this plan period, it's going to get increasingly difficult to do these add-ons and what have you on brownfield sites. And we've got to create those new settlements, and they've got to be done more strategically across a larger geographical area.